Welcome to Crossroad Connection. We're speaking out for those left unheard. My name is Alexa Winnick, and I am the managing editor here at Crossroad Bible Institute. And I'm filling in today for Dr. Shuringa, the president of CBI, the usual host of your program. We have a very interesting show for you today on a topic that might be new to some of you viewers. If you are a regular viewer of the show, you know that we've talked several times about reentry ministries and returning citizens. Today we're going to be talking about one specific challenge that faces many returning citizens, and that is the challenge of housing. So today I have in the studio with me Pastor Jim Bright, who is the executive director of Living Water Prison Ministry Network. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, which is a reentry agency that's trying to ameliorate that problem for many returning citizens.
Yes.
Yeah.
What we do specifically is we come alongside of men as they're getting ready to parole from prison. We go in, meet with them.
In the prisons?
In the prison.
Okay.
And these are men who are doing Bible studies, who have repented of their sin and want to change their life. And as they prepare for reentry into society, we walk with them through that process, and we work with a couple of other agencies as well. But when
in the local Grand Rapids area?
In the local Grand Rapids area,
okay.
Yes.
Great.
And specifically what we do when they come out of prison is we have 2 homes where the men can come and live.
Okay.
And we do not charge any rent. We ask the men that when they get out and they come to live at one of our homes, there's an application process they go through. And we have a housing committee, and they go through the application. And if it's someone who looks like they are a good candidate and they are serious about working their spiritual program, we come alongside of them. We let them live at the house. We ask them to be looking for work. And in the meantime, we ask them to be doing community service, doing things around the house to help out. And then once they do find employment, we ask them first to tithe to their local church. And then secondly, we ask them to make a contribution to the ministry, giving back that which was freely given to them for the next man that's coming out of prison.
Sure. I think it's always fascinating to hear people's stories about how they just felt pushed in that direction to become a pastor or a minister. So could you speak about that a little bit?
I'm glad you asked that question. If you had asked me 13 years ago if I would be doing today what I'm doing, I would have told you absolutely no. I had no intentions of going into ministry. I feel
like that's a common denominator sometimes.
Yes.
Across the board. Not everyone, but some people say that. Yeah.
I owned my own business for 20 years.
Oh, wow.
And I was a food salesman. I traveled all over Michigan and northern Indiana. And I had back surgery. When I had the back surgery, my wife took over my business. Sure. And she let me know that that was not her second choice for a career. And so I had to decide to get rid of the business, go back to work, or find something else to do. And at that time, I was attending Celebrate Recovery, which is a recovery program. I'm a recovering addict and alcoholic.
Okay.
And
yeah, that's a great program.
It is.
Yeah.
I have 13 years clean and sober.
Wow, that's great.
I was working with Celebrate Recovery, and then they had the opportunity for myself and others to go to school for those who are maybe thinking about going into ministry. And New Community Church actually started a school called Nickham, and Pastor Lou Vandermeer headed that up.
Okay.
I went through the program. It was a 3-year program, and I was first commissioned, and then I was ordained, and I went on to Kuiper College, where I'm pursuing currently my social work degree.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
That is a big career change.
It's a very big career change, but prison ministry and social work go hand in hand because you're dealing with hurt people, and hurt people hurt people. And if we can make a difference in a person's life, if we can make a difference in one person for the kingdom of God, we've done what we are called to do. I actually got into the ministry when someone asked me to go to the prison. They said, Jim, you know, for class you have to do 50 hours of service work for your
Okay.
church.
And who was it that prompted that invitation to you? Was that at the school?
That
they
was
asked
at
you?
the
Okay.
school. One of the gentlemen who was currently going to the prison, there was a team that was going to the prison.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I don't know about that.
Right. Had you ever been
No.
inside before? Or no?
No.
Okay. That can be a very, well, I've heard that can be a very eye-opening experience the first time you
Very
visit.
eye-opening.
Yeah. So what were some of the things you thought when you went in for the first time?
Well, before I even went in, my first thought was they won't let me go in. And they said, Jim, let's not go there yet. Let's just see if we can get you cleared to go in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I went back to class 2 weeks later, they informed me that my clearance came back and that we were going to prison on Sunday.
Better get ready.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, I went with them. I told them I would try it.
Mm-hmm.
I went, and it just took that one time, being in the prison and sitting in the room with the men and doing a Bible study and just seeing not only what a blessing it was to them, but what a blessing it was to myself.
Yes.
And I went from there and continued going back to the prison. We went, we went the first and third Sunday of each month.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for 6 years at Deerfield Correctional Facility.
Okay.
And got to know some of the men quite well, and still actually have relationships with some of the men who have gotten out of prison. And a couple of those men have come to live at our house when they did get out of prison. It's just been a wonderful
That's
journey.
neat, coming full circle
Yes,
almost. Yeah.
yes.
That's great. Well, you really hit on something there that we see at CBI all the time is instructors who will write us. Instructors are the ones that will grade the lessons of our students and, disciple them through a long-term process. And they often say, I signed up for this program to, help the students, but they are helped just as much, or they feel even more so in their interactions with the students. So it's this mutual blessing that happens.
Yes.
And it's not, you or instructors going in with this, well, I'm going to fix people attitude, but like, what can we learn from each other?
Yes.
And that's a really beautiful thing, because I think that's when we see like the kingdom of God and the church working as it should. So you went to this prison at Deerfield, was it?
It was Deerfield Correctional Prison.
Okay.
They did finally close that prison.
Okay.
And I started going out to Muskegon Correctional Facility, and there's another whole story behind that.
Sure,
With the
yeah.
gentleman who was, I believe, 87 years old at the time, who
Okay,
was looking
wow.
for a ride, and I thought it was somebody who was struggling with an addiction and needed someone to talk with, because it didn't matter what time he got to work, and he wasn't far from work. He could actually walk to work. And I said, well, just stay right where you're at, and I'll be there in about 5 minutes, because I lived that close to where the directions were that he gave me.
Okay.
And when I pulled up, there was this old man standing with one hand on the railing and the other hand on his cane. He got up in my F-250 truck, and as he was stepping up, he informed me that he would walk across the street, because it was literally across the street, but he told me he couldn't run that fast anymore.
I guess at 87, that might be difficult.
Yes.
Yeah.
He got me in his office. He had a captive audience, and he asked me to go to the prison with him,
Okay.
and that was Muskegon Correctional Facility. And I started going to the prison out there with him and some other men, and we were doing Bible study. And then my wife started working with not working with his wife, but playing Scrabble with his wife, who was 86, I believe, at the time. And
Wow.
my wife and her played Scrabble up until, the evening before she passed. They played Scrabble.
Oh, that's sweet.
They were just a very special couple. And Carl Gunn was very instrumental in my continuing to go into the prison. But then there came a point where I saw a need for housing for men,
Okay.
and more specifically, housing for men who have CSCs, criminal sexual conduct offenses. And when they come out of prison, first of all, before they can get their parole, they have to have an address that they can parole to. And that's a challenge in itself, because there's that 1,000-foot rule
Right.
from schools or
Yeah.
from daycare centers, 500 rule from parks. And so we have a board of directors, and I talked with our board, explaining to them what we wanted to do. And they didn't think there was really that big of a need because there's plenty of housing in Grand Rapids with Mel Trotter, with Guiding Light, some of the other
there are
shelters.
A lot of ministries, that can provide that. So.
Unfortunately, those ministries at that time were not able to accept men who had a CSC offense. So,
you saw a need to fill there.
I saw that need.
And I want to talk more about that right after the break. So stay with us. There's more from Jim Bright right after this.
The Center for Advanced Studies at Crossroad Bible Institute is sponsoring continuing education seminars for instructors and interested church members. These seminars cover a range of issues from restorative justice to responding to Islam. Seminars are open to everyone and free of charge, but advanced registration is required. To find a seminar in your area or to register for an upcoming seminar, go to cbi.fm on the web.
Welcome back to Crossroad Connection. I'm Alexa Winnick, and I'm in the studio today with Pastor Jim Bright, the Executive Director of Living Water Prison Ministry Network. And we've been talking a little bit about your history of how you got involved with prison ministry and just tuned into the whole, situation for returning citizens in general. And right before the break, we had just started to scratch the surface of the housing challenge that faces many people who are newly released from prison. So maybe just jump right back into discussing some of those challenges in more detail.
Okay. Well, like I said earlier, when a man gets ready to transition from prison, they fill out an application. If they're accepted into the ministry, they come to live at one of our two houses. Mm-hmm. We have a 5-room house in the Grand Rapids area on the southeast side of town. And then on the northwest side of town, we have a 4-plex where we can house up to 4 men.
Okay.
And they come, they live at the house. Like I said earlier, they do not pay any rent.
Mm-hmm. But there's certain stipulations.
There are certain stipulations that they have to meet.
Okay.
They have to find a home church. They have to be looking for work. And once they find employment, they tithe to their church. They make a contribution to the ministry, paying it forward for the next man.
Okay.
And then also, they have to start a savings account, and my wife works with the men doing a budget. The men really seem to like that because it gives them some structure. And
it's practical. And
yes. Yeah. So when the men come to live at the house, we have Bible study. We have Bible study on Thursday evenings, and then we have Bible study on Saturday afternoons. So they can choose either time. And then we work with other organizations such as the Clear Group, which is headed up by the Grand Rapids Police Department.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that group is very instrumental. One reason, because they're literally right across the street from where we have one of the ministry houses. Yeah. So the men have access to the resources at Bates Place for CRC Christian Reformed Church.
Yeah, Bates Place is a great ministry as well. We had Brian Blakely on the show earlier this year.
And in fact, speaking of Brian Blakely, he is our house manager for the Franklin Street house.
Yeah, so you're very connected with other local organizations in town. Yeah.
I firmly believe that if we're not working together for the kingdom of God, we're working against the kingdom. So we pool our resources, we come together, and it's all for a greater cause. It's not about us. Right. It's about God.
Right. That reminds me, I came across your mission statement for the ministry while I was, preparing for this, and I'm just going to read it. It says, to offer life-changing help to prisoners transitioning to become godly, productive members of society through Christian volunteers. So I think that's a good summary of everything you've been talking about so far. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more just about how this part about through Christian volunteers, seeing this relationship being built between the people helping and then the people coming into the house, and how, like we said before, it's not just a one-way relationship.
It's a two-way relationship. Yeah. Actually, it's a three-way relationship between the men, a mentor, and God. Mm-hmm. And the mentors are very, very instrumental in working with the men, because the mentor is someone that a man can call and talk with, go have a cup of coffee, someone who can give them a ride if they need a ride to someplace where they're putting in an application possibly, or if they need to go to a doctor appointment, whatever it is that they need to do, that mentor is there to walk with them. Basically, in the bigger scheme of things, what we do is we come alongside of the men, we work with them, we encourage them, and we give them hope. And giving them hope is the biggest thing.
Well, that's one of the questions I am curious about is, from your perspective, having worked with this ministry for some years now, and the men that you are interacting with, what is maybe the biggest concern or worry or anxiety that returning citizens face, men or women coming out of prison? What are some of the first concerns that they struggle with, either emotionally or just practically? You could touch on that.
That's a very good question. When the men come out of prison, their biggest concern is twofold. One, finding someplace to live, and two, finding a job. If you do not have someplace to live, it makes it very difficult to find a job. And if you do not have a job, it makes it very difficult to find housing.
Right. It's kind of like a chicken and egg situation sometimes.
And that's one of the reasons why we come alongside of the men. They've been working a spiritual program in the prison. They come out of prison and they can't find housing. They can't find a job. They get frustrated. And what happens is they go back to the old element and they end up recidivizing and going back to prison. And we are a stopgap for that. We slow the men down. We take that burden of worrying about having to pay rent, having some place to live, and we help them find employment. And we do that through the Clear Group and other organizations that we partner with. And through that process, it takes that burden of having to find work immediately and having to find some place to live. Those needs are met.
Right.
And from there, we can start to build on that. And they can continue to work on their spiritual program, which is the most critical element of the ministry.
Sure. Changing the heart,
Changing the heart.
Have the external things intact, but if, the heart is not in a good place, it's a bigger struggle.
Yes.
So, but I think that touches on just what seems to be a very holistic approach to caring for people who are released from prison. Is that one thing you try to incorporate really strongly? Is it holistic?
Yes, we incorporate that very strongly. The holistic aspect of the ministry is coming alongside of the men, walking with them, and allowing them to continue their spiritual journey. If they continue their spiritual journey, you start to see a true heart change. And as you said, you have to have a heart change. You can have all the knowledge, but if you don't have a true heart change, nothing changes. And you end up going back to the old element. So when I see a man who's been living at the ministry and he's working his spiritual program, he's found employment, he's maybe purchased a car now he's got transportation to get back and forth to work.
Yeah, which is a very important thing in Grand Rapids, even
very
like
important.
City, having transportation. Yeah.
And one of the things that does is that starts to build their self-image, their self-esteem.
And a sense of agency that
Yes.
I can change. Right before, we have a little bit of time right before the break. So I was wondering if you could maybe share a story or two, or maybe just someone in particular that stands out of who's really just benefited from the program or seen change. I know maybe you can't give names or anything, but just from your perspective, something that you've seen that really inspires you to keep going with this ministry.
I'm glad you asked me that, because there are days when I sit back and I ask myself, why in the world are you doing this?
Right.
Why are you beating yourself up? But when you have a man who comes to live at the ministry house and struggles to find employment and finally does find employment, minimum wage job, minimum hours, and then he perseveres through that, and he continues to work his spiritual program, and an opportunity comes along where he's able to get a full-time job, which happened to one of our residents.
That's great.
He started working first shift, and they liked his work, and they asked him if he would mind going to third shift. And the reason for that was because they wanted to give him a key to the building and make him third shift supervisor.
Wow.
And now this man wants to, when he leaves Living Water Prison Ministry Network, he wants to purchase a home so that men can transition from Living Water to a house
Another
that
home.
he has, which is just another stepping stone. They've got accountability. They have that sense of brotherhood, family, that spiritual aspect that's so important.
Sure.
Because there's strength in numbers.
Yeah.
And
But that's a beautiful thing you just brought up too, which is, you've mentioned before earlier in this program, the giving back
Yes.
aspect, that it doesn't just stop at the individual, but it comes back to the community, which
Yes.
is a very empowering thing for any person. And that's, I think, really, really great.
And it's stories like that when I ask myself, why am I doing what I'm doing, that answers the question for me. And that re-energizes me. And I'm able to keep on going.
Well, we're going to take another break here. And then after the break, maybe we can talk about ways that people in the community can get involved with Living Water Prison Ministry Network. So
That'd be great.
yes, stay with us. We'll be right back after the break.
Correcting Bible study lessons is crucial to helping inmates. To partner with CBI in this safe and secure role, please visit us at cbi.fm on the web.
Welcome back to Crossroad Connection. I'm Alexa Winnick, and Jim Bright and I have been having a very interesting conversation. Jim is the executive director of Living Water Prison Ministry Network, which provides transitional housing and just holistic care for men being released from
Yes.
prison. So we've touched on the challenges of housing and just, being released and outside in society after being in prison. So I just love what you're doing at this ministry, and I'm sure that some of our viewers are maybe wondering, how can we get involved? What does your ministry need specifically right now in terms of prayer? So yeah, just if you could comment on that, I'm sure many people would love to hear it. So
I'd be happy to. One of the biggest needs that we have are mentors. It's very hard to get mentors to work with the men, not because people don't want to do it, it's just because it's a time issue.
sure,
And
it takes a commitment.
it's a big commitment. If someone was interested in mentoring, they could go to our website,
Okay.
livingwaterpmn.org.
Should be on the
and
screen.
Yes, and they would be able to, once they're at the website, they can surf around inside the website and they could sign up to be a mentor. They could email myself,
Okay.
and we can get together over a cup of coffee and talk about that, what it entails being a mentor. We've had a few mentors from CJC that have worked with a
great.
couple of our men, and they actually do training, which
Okay.
is very, very helpful.
Yes.
Another organization is the Genesis Group, which is headed up by Chaplain Bill Bursma at the Kent County Jail. And they meet the first Thursday of each month. And what they do is they gather information and they disseminate information out to loved ones, family members of those who have been charged with a CSC offense, or someone who's actually in prison or getting ready to come home. And it's just, again, another source of networking.
Right.
And we're always looking for more people to attend that, because it's a way to get connected and get involved.
The Genesis
It's the
project?
It's the Genesis Group.
Genesis group. Okay.
Yes. And I'm not certain what their website is. I should know it right off the top of my head, but
I'm
I
sure
don't.
people can look that up and
Yes.
come across it pretty easily.
But it's a wonderful organization, and I've been with them. My wife and I have been with them for since the inception.
Okay.
And they provide mentors. I've had mentors come from the Genesis Group who have worked with our men, and it's a safe place where our men can go, just as the Clear Group is a safe place they can go. Other ways that people could help, we always need prayer.
Right. And that was one thing I wanted to ask you. What are some specific prayer requests right now?
Right now, specific prayer requests would be, well, we are looking for a new house. We held a fundraiser back the last part of April, and we raised a little over $10,000. After paying expenses, we had just under $10,000, and a local church They donated $1,000 out of their general fund.
That could be also something they're praying for as well.
They could pray about that.
Yeah.
And if that's something that God puts on their heart, that is another way that they could help.
And what about the men specifically that are coming through the homes right now? What are some things that people can pray for them?
For the men, things specifically would be encouragement, the strength to continue on for the next day, and just taking life one moment at a time, and taking the time to connect with God and have a true spiritual experience. That is one of the biggest things, because they get busy once they find a job or they're going to school. Then that interferes with Bible study time, and just keeping them held up in prayer for that strength to stay connected, because it's so easy to stray.
Well, for all of us, I think.
All of us, yeah. We all fall short of the glory of God.
Sure, and changing a routine,
Yes.
that can really throw off what we've been used to,
Yes.
So I can imagine that would be a challenge for
Another
them as
prayer
well.
request would be for more gainful employment, transitioning from part-time employment to full-time
Full-time.
employment.
Sure.
Fortunately, right now we are blessed with having all of the men who are either employed or going to school or in a service such as MRS, Michigan Rehabilitation Services.
We're getting close here to the end of our time. It goes by quickly when
It
you're
does,
talking about
yes.
these things you're clearly passionate about, Jim. One question I like to ask people who are involved with prison ministry, just to get different perspectives, but why should the church care about returning citizens? Why is it so important for this to be on the radar, to get involved with ministries like this? Just from your perspective, what would you say to that?
From my perspective, they are God's creation. We are all his children. And when a man comes out of prison and he finds a home church where he's fellowshipping and maybe doing Bible study, someone asks him maybe after a month, "So what do you do?" And the man decides to become honest and tells them that he just recently got out of prison or she got out of prison. And the next week when they come back to church, the people that they've been fellowshipping with are 2 aisles over, 3 rows back, and they walk out of the church never coming back.
Yeah.
So the church is very instrumental in this transition process of building these men up to be godly men. Without the support of the church, there's no restoration. Without restoration, there's no hope.
Right.
But
And
when
hope is the word. It seems like it to be a key word.
it is a
for
key
you
word,
in this process.
yes. I describe, Webster's dictionary describes hope as expecting something to happen. I describe it as expecting someone to happen, and that would be Jesus Christ.
Wow. Well, I think that is a great note to end on for this program. Just some really great words, Jim. So thank you so much for coming on the show
Thank
today.
you for having me today.
Thanks for talking about the ministry, so people can know more about it, and just the challenge that faces people getting out of prison,
Yes.
and the practical matters and the heart matters as well.
Yes.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep. And thank you for joining us for another episode of Crossroad Connection. We hope to see you again right here next week.